Welcome to the SBE podcast series where we talk about currently and economically viable and interesting topics with our network of academics and professionals. Today it's a special episode because we're doing it online, which haven't happened before, but there is a first time for everything. And I'm Dóra Gal. I'm hosting this for a while, this podcast series. And today our guest is Dirk Schwendt, and he is the principal director at Accenture, and he's tuning in from Vienna. So, Dirk, thank you very much for taking the time, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Dora. Great to be here.
So, first of all, let's dive into to talk about little bit about yourself. Okay. So, can you tell us a little bit about your background and all your studies, or like not all your studies, but part of your studies, university, and your career background?
Yeah, maybe let's start where I'm today and go back from there. So as you just indicated, I'm working for Accenture in the Vienna office. I'm responsible for our group of learning professionals in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, and sitting here in Vienna. And my way through Accenture has also been lasting quite a while, so 25 years plus. I started a long time ago in the Frankfurt office of Accenture and started in the financial services area. And this came as I had the typical economics background and studies. Also did an apprenticeship at a bank, at a Commerzbank, so was kind of financial services guy. But very soon into Accenture, I realized, well, these people topics when doing big transformation projects, these are really cool. And there's a lot of learning to do. And Accenture is in the DNA, it's an IT company primarily, and all we do somehow relates to IT. And so if you implement new IT system, of course, there has a lot of learning to be done as things change, process changes, everyday processes for the people change. And this has this learning aspect, this change management aspect, communication aspect. And this is what I've been focusing on since, and not just in a financial services space, but also in all the different industries which we have.
Yeah, so basically the clients that you're working with, they're stemming from different industries, and it's not there is no limit here, I guess. But like, what exactly is the size usually of your clients?
Well, it's typically the big companies, the DAX 40 companies, big companies, the big names. These are the typical clients. Sounds a bit arrogant as I'm just saying it, but yes, it's that typically big clients. It's these big clients have typically big integrational project. If a big company implements a system, it's even if it's a local company from Germany, Austria, Switzerland, they often have a global reach. So a lot of branches in other countries, IT has to be rolled out to these countries. Learning and training has to be done, not just in the home country, not just in Germany, but also all around the world. And there are not that many providers who are able to cater this need globally as well as locally. And that's what we're doing. And that's why mainly our clients are the big names in the industries.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how does this kind of learning, know-how transfer works usually in these projects? Is it something that you transfer within organization, or is it like something that is like a completely new system that you're going to introduce to the organization?
Also there we have different settings. One typical setting is that you have a merger of two companies, and then you typically have two systems, and you decide which of the systems are we going to take forward. And then one of these systems is chosen. One half of the company then has to be trained on this system. Or another typical situation is that generally a new core system is going to be implemented. Nowadays, very often we see SAP systems, S/4HANA being implemented for whole companies, and then of course the whole workforce has to be trained on these new processes, new systems, and then new daily routines they have to put in there.
And how long usually takes? How long does it take usually a project? Also the implementation, so like the preparation of the project, but also itself the learning from the organizational side. And are you already also there when the whole learning situation happens, or you just prepare the project for them and then let them do the rest of the work?
No, that's one thing we as Accenture do. We help our clients end to end, yeah. And typically, it's not just us learning guys. There's a lot of Accenture people with the IT focusing on the IT, focusing on the technical aspects, focusing on the processes, and also us then taking care for the people dimension. And this project implementations usually take long, so more than a year typically. From a learning side, of course, we step in a little bit later. Of course, first there has to be a system which we can create a training material on. So it has to be a test system or a learning environment we can use. And what we typically do then is, well, we develop the learning material, decide on the learning format mix, of course, which is always also some little bit time consuming. Also defining jointly with the client, defining what is the right mix of training formats we apply for their situation. Depends on the individual culture, depends on their technical environment, and many other aspects. And after we defined this kind of training concept, training formats, we derived the curricula, focusing on the different roles within the company, and then we're starting to produce the training materials, which usually takes for a implementation like S4HANA something like 6 months, a little bit more probably than that. And then of course you have the material ready, you have to train the people, etc. So this is about the time frame where we support in, if it's pure system integration projects.
And like, is there such a case when a learning project is not successful, or you have to rethink the whole thing and just start from the beginning?
Has a question. What does mean not successful? Typically, it's successful. Everything Accenture does is usually successful. And of course, it's always a question, when is learning? It's an age-old question. When has learning been successful? If you have completed the learning, if you apply it, if you're just able to if you do something more efficient than before, gain time for other things, very, very difficult to measure. But the key things, very often, for example, looking at a bank with branches, and typically if you change the systems there, you have a migration, something like a migration weekend. So employees in the banks and the branches end their week on a Friday, cut off, switch off their computers, go off their old systems. They come in Monday morning and have to be able to work with the new systems. Yeah? And here success already means, well, systems work, clients can be served and can get what they want, and employees are really able to serve their clients. Yeah. So in the first days, it's usually kind of survival mode, of course, because usually clients, if you go to a bank branch, you don't care if there's been a system change or not, whatever they do. You just want to have your service, want to have your money, your deposit and payout, whatever there is. And this is key. And then in the first days and weeks, when processes establish a little bit more, then it turns out really, do things really work out well in every case, or do they not? But typically this works very well. That's what we're there for, to make sure that it works very well.
And usually when these changes are like they start the changes and like also the learning, do you start from the bottom, or is it like parallel in all the levels of the organization, or is it from the top, it's starting from the top and then just going down to all the branches of the organization?
Yeah, in the beginning, early phase of the training portion, you look at the different roles and their actual training needs. And as you say, these training needs differ, of course, from the functional role, but also level wise. Yeah, and we think about the whole role model right in the beginning, and define learning modules for each of these roles right in the beginning before we go into production mode. So in the end, all the levels and all the roles will receive their training, but of course customized to their actual needs. Yeah, that's also a critical point. Usually, you cannot afford, and employees also do not want to spend days and days on training. Well, they have a job to do, and also
Yeah.
before migration, they can say, okay, no, I'm out of business for 5 days because I need to train. So you really need to make sure that employees, that learners only get the content they really, really need for their role. And this is also a lot of work to be done in advance to really define what is it, what they really need in their role to do their daily business.
And for example, there are some changes and you get a new system, you get trained on it, but it can happen that certain employees leave the company. So do you know what can companies do, or what are they doing certainly to retain these kind of trained employees? So it's not two ways to do the whole training.
I'm not sure if I did the question. What companies can do to what? To do what?
To retain these employees. So basically, they do the training. I guess it has like substantial expenses because of that, and then the employees, especially when they're highly skilled. Let's say after a merger, they decide they're going to leave. So do you know about something that they can do or they're doing to avoid that?
Yeah, okay, this opens up several doors. If we're just talking about a system training, well, this is something which happens at scale. And of course, there are people leaving, there are new people joining, you have that. But this is typically not because of the training, or it's good or bad training. Of course, root causes are much deeper here. And then we get into the general topic of learning in an organization, also away from the pure system changes. And this is also something we are supporting as Accenture, and I think that's also what you're implicating here. We see a lot of changes in organization, not just in the systems. We see changes in technology. We see technology-driven changes, especially look at AI, for example, which affects people, which affects the roles. Roles are different. Different skills are in need. And this, of course, means that people have to adapt to new roles, have to think what to do with their current skills, what is needed to upskill a person. And this is also a topic we are covering well, and not just covering by, well, we come in and produce training for a system. This is a much wider topic, thinking about how can companies make the best out of their existing talent. What are the upskilling needs? First of all, which roles, of course, does a company need for the future? Which skills do they have, and what do they need to do to upskill people to match the needs of the respective roles? And this, of course, then initiates a whole process, learning-wise, which start at, okay, let's define what our general direction should be, what the skills are. We need to assess the skills first within the company, the SS skills. We need to see where are the gaps compared to the to-be skills, on a role level, on an individual level, and then starting to define what could be content and what could be learning and learning formats to upskill those people to meet the needs of a new role, of a more current role, or the changed needs of a role. And this, of course, has a learning dimension, and also as you indicated in your question, there's a lot of change for the people implicated. Some people might not be happy with a new role or with a new required skill set, and they might leave. Yeah, others might join. But I think this is also today a kind of general things that happens. People come, people go. Yeah, but of course, it's important for a company to make a good offer to their people, to make a compelling offer for them to stay and to provide security and the support in such transformation processes for the people, provide people with the support, also learning-wise, to be able to develop into a new role and to meet the needs which this role brings.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in general, it's as you said, it's a tendency that people are like just switching jobs so much easier than before, I think. But also on the other hand, as you mentioned, AI and all the new technologies, I guess then also on the side of Accenture, you need a lot of skills and a lot of understanding of a lot of different roles in an organization. So what are the skills that you need in Accenture to do this kind of job? So what are the assets of the consultants at Accenture?
Yeah, it's basically we need to have industry knowledge. We have to understand how a company in an industry, whatever it is, works. This is important really to have a basic understanding, even for us in the learning space. So learning might be a little bit more generic, but it's always best to really know your client, know the industry, know what the challenges are, know what the typical roles are and what the needs of these roles are, and what then the changing needs would be. And to understand what the changing needs would be, you need also to understand what are the technologies which are driving change, what are the implications of this technology. So apart or additionally to the knowing the industry, knowing the client, you really need to know about these changes and need to be, let's say, call it in front of the wave, and have a keen view on technology and the technology changes. Only if you have these two components, knowing the client, knowing the industry, knowing the content, and knowing the technology on the other side, you're able to provide your clients with the best ideas on how to deal with it and how also to create compelling and effective learning measures.
And for example, just taking the example of AI, is that currently already a trend that people are losing their jobs against AI? So is that currently a thing that on one side we're happy that AI is doing the job instead of us, but also on the other end, like we need still a paycheck at the end of the month? So is that already present among your clients?
To be honest, no. This is always something where's the big dark picture. Ooh, people losing their jobs due to AI. That's not what we're seeing. I understand that there is often a kind of fear people might have, but I think that's as it's always been with technology developments in the past, whatever, 200 years. Yeah. Of course, jobs will not be the same. In many cases, jobs will change. Also, the requirements for a role might change, as I indicated before, and everybody needs to adapt to these change requirements and grow into new roles. So existing roles might change, and completely new roles might evolve. Yeah. So I don't think that it's a big fear to be there, that jobs are going to be lost and people are going to lose their jobs. And I don't think that this is a really reality. But it's interesting that you asked, do you have the feeling you're young in your career, even before starting your career, are you afraid of there's no job for me because of AI, or what's your view on it?
Not necessarily. It's more the idea that there are certain things that I should just not even bother, because it's just
Good.
It's
That's
hard.
good.
It's heavy for me to calculate certain things. For example, or this is really the time-intensive kind of tasks that AI can do way better than I could do. For example, or I think. Within the time limit for sure. And I just assume that by the time I'm going to be in the midst of my career, it's not even going to be appreciated if I can do it myself, because I wouldn't even need it in the first place. So it's also something that I would consider, for example, in terms of accounting, maybe at some point AI is going to be way better than an intern or analyst, like not an analyst, but like a junior colleague. So yeah, in that regard, I do consider sometimes, but I also know that if you're keeping up with the technology, of course, it shouldn't be really a problem. But of course, I think there are some maybe there are some industries when it could be more of a problem. I don't know, for example, more of a like a tourism industry, for example, when you plan a trip or something, I think AI can do sometimes just as well, if just on the base level.
But this is one interesting point, as you ask, what are the elements and the skill sets or main pillars of the skill sets, for example, working for Accenture. And the one you're mentioning is one additional pillar I missed to say, being able to deal with unsecurity. Yeah, the world has become a little bit or much more fast paced, much more insecure, and you need to be able to deal with it and to stay optimistic. Yeah. Typically, well, there's reason to be optimistic. Yeah, technology brought so many cool things, and it will so in the future. Of course, there are risks. Of course, there are changes, but having this general optimistic view and be ready to deal with insecurity, this is of course a skill working for a consultancy like Accenture, but in many other areas, of course, as well. Yeah.
And just because we are here, are you also doing coaching for these organizations? Is it also part of your service, for example?
That's coaching is not the typical Accenture services. We have service lines where we do that on a lower scale, but typically, as I also indicated in the beginning, well, what we're doing is typically large scale, like X thousand people to be trained on topic X, Y, Z within just a few weeks or months. Yeah, and coaching by design is much more an individual thing, which we provide, but which we do not provide at scale, like these training services I was describing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So so you practically have all these projects. They are differing, and you have different clients in that sense. So it's not like an ongoing for several years client base.
Yeah, we also are working with clients for many years. You know, big companies, there are always transformation processes going on. If they're completed in one area, they start in another area. And of course, there's a lot of trust which has been building when jointly working on big transformational processes. And as I indicated, Accenture supports clients end to end, from the first ideas, thinking about strategy, thinking about how do we approach a transformation, up to the end of it when systems need to run, and we helped to educate people, to train people, and to really make sure that systems and processes are running well. And if you have worked this way end to end, of course, this builds a high level of trust with the client, and they have the next complex transformation progress. They typically also ask us to support them. So it's not that the projects go on for such a long time, but typically also we help certain clients over a long time in their different transformation challenges. Yeah.
And from your experience, because you're in this business for a while already, what are the typical bottlenecks that you have throughout the process? So the typical things that can go wrong. Of course, I understand things don't go wrong, and at the end it's all working fine. But I assume that here there are also some problems, because learning is usually not so easy.
Yeah, of course. No, lots of things, of course, go wrong along the way. It's just important that in the end it all works out. And that's the complexity any kind of transformation project brings. Looking at learning and looking at system learning, of course, we are from the training side, we're often very much pressed because we need the system to be available. So we are the first ones who need a look at the system to be able to create the training material. So we need to be very early there. But also on the other side, the training people are the first ones which have to create deliverables. We have to be out with our deliverables before the system goes live. Of course, people need to be trained several weeks or months before. So, and this is the biggest challenge typically, working in between. Oh yeah, the system is now really in a mode and in a status where it's so stable that we can pick the systems and pick the screens and make our simulations. uh, that we're really able to do that on the one side, and the other side, there's also the expectation that we roll out the training early. And this is always this crunch in between, having all the people available who can provide the functional input, yeah, dealing with system changes which arise from the different test phases which we see. There are always system changes, and we have to rebuild these changed screens or fields, whatever there is, rebuild it in the trainings which already have been produced. And these are the typical challenges. This is not like things go wrong, but this is what typically happens, of course, if you implement a system, if you develop a system, if you test a system, if you implement a system, training somehow has to follow. And this is, of course, very often tough, as we have to stay close to these developments.
Yeah, sure. I do understand it's a bit of an iterative process. But just another question, just about like how you prepare for a project. For a team, what kind of team do you set up for these kind of projects? Because I guess you need different skills within the organization as well.
Absolutely. And as said, if we for the big transformational project, we typically help the client with a large and wide scale of skills, starting from the technology guys who are really able to develop the code, to develop the system, and many other people around the architecture, around the functional stuff, around the processes. And also, we as training people, when we come in, we also need to come with different skill sets, with different experiences. And what we typically have, looking at large global corporations, a training project looks like that we have a small team on the ground, closely to the client, also physically, 3, 4 people who develop the training strategy, do the training needs analysis, develop the curriculum, and people which are already there or there will stay throughout the whole development process and be the main contacts for the clients to make sure that the functional input which is provided is adequate and correct. And then on top, we have typically a larger team of training developers. And if it's a global company with global rollouts in several languages, also English, we very much leverage our capabilities, which are near or offshore in Poland or in India. We have big training development teams there, which are then developing the training, and our local team is then the contact between the interface between the client needs, and the, let's call it, factory training, production factory in Poland or in India. And so we have a mix of different seniorities and different skill levels. So people being on the ground, having a general feeling, as I said, for the industry and for the content and for the learning processes. And on the other side, people in the training factory are very close to training tools, authoring tools, system simulation tools, and are doing a lot of their handiwork there. And so, even within the training team, we combine different skill sets, different experience levels, and different specialization areas.
Okay, so for example, if I would want to enter this industry as a junior consultant, for example, what kind of skills, like what should I prepare, for example, if I would to enter an interview or something?
As I said, the key pillars are knowing the industry. In this case, if you enter Accenture as a junior, you do not need to know a special industry. This comes with experience. You primarily need to have a very open mindset. You need to be willing and ready to learn quickly, to perform, to work hard. Yeah, it's still in consulting. It's also a question of working hard, and of course, you need, if you're in the learning space, you need to have a feeling of what are the typical formats, is the technology around learning, in which way is this technology going, what might the learning space look like in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Yeah, and if you bring this this mix when you enter Accenture in the learning area, you will immediately start a steep learning curve to gain the knowledge on all the other areas you need, like the industry knowledge, so functional knowledge on the one side, and the operational knowledge when in order to work with the tools, etc. Yeah? So primarily it's a mindset and an attitude thing you need to bring, of course, with some solid education on either is it's a business education, business background, or economics, or in the didactical space. One of them would be fine to start in a learning space at Accenture, but the mindset is most cases even more important. We very often also have people from a completely different background who bring the right mindset, the interest, the drive, the willingness to learn, ability to learn, and these people also typically prove to perform very well and develop very well.
Yeah, just like you also came from a different background in the beginning, so it's a prime example. Then for an ending question, like since we were talking about learning curve, I also know that you also have a podcast yourself. Can you tell us a bit about your podcast?
Yeah, sure. Learning Curve. It's a German podcast called the Lernkurve. And the idea is, and it's not an Accenture podcast. Yes, it's done by me and I'm at Accenture, but what we try to do, it's not an Accenture promotional podcast. What we want to cover is really to discuss with guests on current developments in the corporate learning space or the corporate communication space, to provide also for our listeners a broad overview on these topics, and might provide a nudge, an impulse to think of certain things and developments which take place. And as far as we can judge, as far as we can see, this works very well. People see this as really like, as I said, as a nudge to think about certain things, and they typically do not see it as an Accenture promotional activity. There's a consultancy who wants to sell their work, and this is good that we do not have this perception, but it's really a rather functional and neutral thing. And this allows us also to have guests from different backgrounds. Of course, we have guests from within Accenture, experts on certain topics, but we also have guests from several companies, and they're happy to join these podcasts, as they see that they're not a vehicle to do promotion for Accenture, but that they really ask for their concrete background, for their concrete knowledge, for their concrete views. And this is what I think makes this podcast successful.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think it's also the same here in Maastricht, that primarily we are connected to Maastricht. But as you see, like today we also have a special episode, so it can change from time to time. Well, then if you don't have anything else, thank you very much for tuning in for this episode. It was a pleasure. And I really hope that anyone listening to it and is interested in organizational learning is going to also check out your podcast. If they also speak some German, it might help.
All right. Thank you very much, Dóra. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.